Greetings and welcome. Welcome to FitWit MD Live. This is another special edition brought straight to you by a wonderful new group known as IBD Desis. That's right. Today we are here to celebrate 2021 South Asian World IBD Day. I'm Dr. Neil Nandy and we have a wonderful show today. Stay tuned. Welcome, gang. It is a beautiful Friday. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And today is 2021 South Asian World IBD Day. This is the month of May, so a lot of IBD activity. And it's about time that we talk about being South Asian, having Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and talking what it's like to be in South Asian culture with this illness. Today we have a tremendous panel of guests. I'm going to introduce them one by one and also have them introduce themselves. They are from all over the world, all walks of life. Welcome to our show. Today we have Gaurav Sengupta, Ruchita Dunning, Tina Aswani Om Prakash, and then, of course, myself. So I'll have all of our guests go ahead and introduce themselves one by one. Gaurav, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Thank you very much, Dr. Nandi, and good evening from Kolkata, India. I'm Gaurav Sengupta. I'm 31 years old currently, residing in Kolkata, India. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in the year 2015 when I was about 25 years old. I was a banker in the UAE back then. I am currently an entrepreneur by profession, living in Calcutta, and fighting Crohn's disease for the past 6 years.
Thank you, Gaurav. I really appreciate you coming here, being on our show, and sharing your story with our group and everyone so we can learn that we're not the only ones who have to go through this diagnosis, and we can learn from your perspectives and experiences too. Ruchita, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, all. I'm Ruchita Dunung. Thank you for having us today. And I'm 25 years old. I was diagnosed with Crohn's in 2018. So before that, I had a journey of 8 years to get diagnosed, but here I am today. And I am currently a master's in healthcare policy and management student at Carnegie Mellon University. Prior to Carnegie Mellon University, I was working as a dentist for 2 years, and coming along all the health disparities in the Indian healthcare system, I thought, why not look at the healthcare system broadly through the managerial side? So thank you for having me today.
Well, I think there's a whole lot more to unravel in your incredible story and what you're doing here. So we're going to learn more about that later in the program. Tina, you need no introduction, but you are owner Crohn's. But for those who may not know you, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, first and foremost, Dr. Nandi, for having us here today. And thank you, Ruchita and Gaurav, for being a part of this. I know how hard it is to talk about these things. I do want to give a shout out to Sharon and Sean. They were also supposed to be here today, but due to health issues, they could not be, but we will have you on in the future, I promise. So my name is Tina. I've had Crohn's disease since 2006, since the age of 22. I've had several surgeries. I live with a permanent ileostomy and on biologics right now. I live in New York City. I am doing my master's degree at Mount Sinai's Icahn School of Medicine, and my specialization is public health, global health specifically. And like Ruchita, my interest especially lies in health disparities and voicing the concerns around health equity and bringing health literacy to light. Thank you again, Dr. Nandi.
It's my great pleasure, and it's really an honor to be here with all of you to share your stories. For those of you who are just tuning in or may not know me, my name is Dr. Neil Nandy. I'm born here in America. My parents are from Kolkata and Allahabad. I'm Bengali, and I am a gastroenterologist here at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I specialize solely in Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. My father was diagnosed with Crohn's, and I'm truly impassioned by what I do for my patients. And my main objective here today is to be a host, to be a resource, to answer questions, and to really encourage a physician-patient community dialogue. And that's what we're really here for, South Asian community. If we've learned anything, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, they really don't know any bounds. They don't discriminate. It affects all genders, all race, all creed. And in South Asian community, we're not unique in this, but there's quite a bit of a cultural stigma when it comes to almost any type of illness. It's quite frustrating, and I can already feel the community shaking their heads in agreement. And no less is that stigma when it comes to anything that has to do with gastrointestinal health, especially Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So I'm hoping that today our community here can really rise up and let our South Asian community across the globe know that you're not alone. There are many people like you and who are going through similar experiences that can relate to you, and that can be your resource, and that we can learn from each other. And that today, on this day of May 14, 2021, that we rise up in one voice to break the stigma and start the conversation. So with that, I'm going to allow Tina to go ahead and start us off by beginning the moderation of our discussion. And if you're tuning in, please ask questions away in the comment box. We'll pop you up on the screen and try to get to as many questions as possible. And what we can't get to, we will be having regular series conversations, likely on a monthly basis, where we'll get to everything that we possibly can. Tina?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nandi, for the fabulous introduction. So I wanted to start off a little bit. Gaurav, Ruchita, you're both from India. Just for us to understand what that diagnosis process was like for you both. I wanted to understand how you got diagnosed, where you got diagnosed. What was that like? Did it take a while? Had you heard of inflammatory bowel disease? If you don't mind going into some of these things. Ruchita, would you like to start?
Sure. So my diagnosis process was a long adventure of 8 years. When I was 13 years old, I had my first fistulectomy. And since then, I was put on tuberculosis drugs, but nowhere near an IBD diagnosis. And along those 8-year spans, I got 4 surgeries done, but again, nowhere near IBD diagnosis. So when I was in the 3rd year of my dental college, I came across general surgery and general medicine. That's when I was ticking off a few boxes while learning about Crohn's disease. And I was like, wait, this is something that I am showing. These are the symptoms I am showing. Should I look into these more? And after my last surgery in my final year, I did ask my doctor, since I was showing certain symptoms around the Crohn's disease diagnosis. So my doctor did put me through a colonoscopy, and finally I was diagnosed. And that's a relief because I had the answer to my recurring fistulas, and finally I got diagnosed and got treated, and now I am really on the path on remission. So, yep, I am pretty glad that somewhere along the lines, Crohn's disease diagnosis was a happy moment for me rather than some sad moment in my life.
Wow, Ruchita, that's so powerful and so on so many levels, because it's almost like you had to educate yourself to get that diagnosis. And I think that there's a lot of that going on from what I hear from other patients is until Crohn's or ulcerative colitis gets mentioned to them, or if they're in medical school like yourself, it really doesn't come on their radar until they have some kind of exposure and then can ask their doctor about it. So I'm sorry you went through so much with the fistulectomies. My heart goes out to you because I've had a lot of fistulas myself. But Gaurav, what was your diagnosis process like, if you don't mind me asking? Where were you? What were your emotions, and what led up to it?
Right. Thanks, Tina. Thank you for the question. I was actually diagnosed in the UAE. I was working as a banker in the year 2015. Now, I'd just like to say that even as a kid, as a child, I had stomach issues. I would get the occasional constipation, the occasional diarrhea, acidity, gas, and just certain IBS symptoms throughout my childhood. I've had an endoscopy once when I was really little, just to get it checked out, but nothing really came out of it. But when I was working in Dubai, I started getting a lot of acidity for about a year. And there was this one time when I was eating dinner outside, and the acidity and the gas got so bad that I actually had a blackout right outside the restaurant. That's when I went to see the doctor, and I complained of digestive issues. And I started going for a diagnosis. But nothing really came out of it. I was prescribed some over-the-counter medicines, and that was the end of it. For me, the real diagnosis, where it really began, started with a shocker, because it was for 3 days that I had no bowel movement, and I was cramping very severely. And I decided, I had family in Dubai as well, and I just told them that I need to get hospitalized, because this is not normal, this isn't regular. I did get hospitalized. I complained of a lower abdomen pain on the right side of my navel to the doctors there. So they sent me in for a CT scan, and they were probably suspecting appendicitis back then. But the CT scan showed that there were wall thickenings in my terminal ileum. And that's when a gastroenterologist actually came into the picture, and he suggested that I get a colonoscopy. The colonoscopy happened, and there you were. There was a 10-centimeter stricture in my ileum, and that's the first time I actually heard of Crohn's disease. And the doctor said, look, I think there may be a chance that you have Crohn's, right? And I hadn't heard of Crohn's before that. I didn't know what Crohn's was. But I do come from a family of doctors. Both my grandfathers were doctors. In fact, both my maternal and my paternal grandfathers. My paternal aunts, two of my paternal aunts, one is a pediatrician and the other is a gastroenterologist. So there is a medical background in the house. So I called them up immediately. And I said, look, there's the situation. This is the situation. And my doctors are actually suspecting Crohn's disease. And their first reaction was, but that's very rare in say India or in our community. So are you sure this is Crohn's? And that's where it kind of began. No, they had, my aunt had probably heard of Crohn's disease because she had practiced in the UK earlier. But for me, I just started reading up Google. And that was a moment of, just like anybody would, just to know what this was all about. It was a moment of immense stress and anxiety, because here you were looking down at yourself having almost been diagnosed or suspected of having something which was reading as a non-curable disease, or something that you'd have to manage for the rest of your life. And I'm not going to lie, I was quite scared. So my aunt spoke to a gastroenterologist back in India that she knew, and she spoke of inflammation and tuberculosis is very common in India. So just as Ruchita mentioned earlier, and my aunt was like, "How do you know that it's not tuberculosis? And we need to have a better look at this." And my family wanted to be in better control. So they called me back to India for a diagnosis, a more thorough diagnosis. And that's when the rounds to the various gastroenterologists actually began. They were not convinced because, first of all, I've always been an athletic kid, and I've always been into working out. And in general, I've taken care of my fitness. I've been reasonably regimented. So they were like, how is it that you got diagnosed with something like a chronic illness like this? Where did it come from? And a lot of the GIs that I went to initially were actually telling me that this could well be genetic in nature, which is seen in Crohn's disease. And nobody in my family prior to me has actually been diagnosed with an autoimmune illness, leave alone Crohn's, in the past. So it was all very new for them. And there was just in general a lack of acceptability. I also was finding it very difficult to trust any GI or move ahead with somebody in India, because I come from a family of old school practitioners who are very compassionate and kind towards their patients, and that's what I've been used to. And here, nobody was really telling me more or giving me enough time to understand what this disease was all about or the rest repercussions. But that's when thank God, my current GI, Dr. Debashish Datta from Calcutta, came in. He had vast experience of dealing with Crohn's because he practiced in the UK for a really long time. And he sat me down and he explained to me how we were going to go about it, that he wanted to do another colonoscopy, go ahead, look at the biopsies for himself, send me to a radiologist who was going to opine on it, and how we were going to actually move ahead and check out diagnosis. Then he went on to get an opinion from the radiologist, and eventually he also did away with the suspicion of tuberculosis by putting me under a test. And eventually we started the medication, but it took a lot of time to get there for me because I really didn't know what Crohn's was all about. And I was very, very new to it. Thank God it wasn't too late. Thank God I didn't have to undergo surgery. Thank God for my gastroenterologist. I'm so thankful to him that he treated me the right way, and I was lucky enough to be treated the right way, and I am where I am right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Gaurav. Ruchita, just going back to you, regarding sort of that acceptance component that Gaurav was talking about, and also your family's acceptance, what did that look like for you living in India? What was it like, with the fistulas? What was that process like? Or, potentially being told you might have tuberculosis and then realizing it was Crohn's. What was sort of the emotion that went on there, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. So, firstly, I would really like to thank my family to taking such good care of me, because fistulectomies are really huge procedure. Not a huge procedure, but the aftercare after the surgery is really intensive, and you really need someone to take care of you with the daily activities, because you are really immobilized after the surgery. So my family really supported me during the aftercare of the surgery, so that really helped me to get through it. But looking at the acceptance part, it was really difficult for me, because at the age of 13, a little girl wouldn't really understand what is really going on with such a complicated thing that has never been seen before. And also being in school, it was my 10th standard, 10th grade. So I think everyone knows that 10th grade is such an important part of the academics. And I had missed my school for 2 months, and I wasn't ready to give in my grades for something like this. So it was very difficult for me to accept. And being a girl, it was difficult to accept and convey to someone, to something happening in the perianal region. And that is kind of stigmatized when we speak about anything related to the digestive system or anything related to excretion as a whole. It is not normal to talk about these things, because people look down on it. And really talking about it and speaking about perianal fistulas to my family was fine, but to my teachers, to my friends, to everyone other than my family, was not something that was easy for a girl. And looking at it now, uh, about all those four other surgeries too, I was in my dental college when I was in for the other three surgeries, and I would miss my college a lot, because really, it wasn't easy at all, because how would I tell people that, I am making pus in my perianal region? How would I tell people that there is there isn't anything going on right, along my perianal region that wasn't visible, anything going on in my intestines or anything going in my perianal region wasn't visible to people, and how is that possible? But I couldn't help it. I just had to, just suck it up and just take it in and just go ahead with it. But few of my friends and my family members really helped me through it. And on that part, what I would find easier looking back was if I had gotten that acceptance earlier, I would have been really, uh, you know, it would have been easier for me to accept it in a way rather than taking the hard path, the difficult part. If people around me knew what I would have felt and how I was feeling at that moment and how difficult it was to me sustain around them and sustain around in any kind of situation and environment, if people would just understand me, I think it would have been much easier on my part to accept it and fight the disease uh, with greater strength maybe. So yeah.
I'm
Well, I
listening to
just
you
want to
both.
say, yeah.
I was listening to you both, and a couple of themes, or thoughts I had. Um, One, I'm really happy. I heard that it was hard to find a good doctor, but I'm glad that you both found doctors who were willing to explore it, and look for a diagnosis. For our audience, just the medical perspective of things in all around the world, before Crohn's was a well-known diagnosis or a better-known diagnosis, tuberculosis would mimic findings of Crohn's. And if you are in a country where tuberculosis may be endemic, one way for your physician to find out is simply to take a biopsy and do a simple stain. They just look under the microscope and look for it, and that's the way you find it. So someone has to think of it and do it. And actually, some of the modern day biologic treatments, not all, but some of them can actually make tuberculosis worse if you are on them and haven't ruled out tuberculosis. That's the medical aspect of things. And there's so much more that we can talk about, but we're not here to give, I'm not here to give a medical school lesson on treatment and whatnot, but rather, I do want to highlight that there is a lot of stress, severe stress and anxiety while you're going through this. And both of you highlighted that in your discussions here about this interrupted you in the prime of your lives, in your careers and schooling and training. And that, I think both of you kind of also mentioned that it would be nice to have that you both had good family support, but it would be even more nice if people were informed about this nebulous diagnosis, this Crohn's, this ulcerative colitis, this fistulizing disease, right? And so part of what we're doing here today is we want to talk about it, listen to you all. And if you're listening to this program, I'm hoping that you're going to share it. You share this knowledge, you talk openly, you mention this diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease to other people in your community who are not diagnosed yet. They may not even have it, but just so that they hear about it. They may not even understand that this diagnosis even is possible or exists. So just by you listening and sharing it on your social feeds, you will make an impact in the community around you. I just wanted to highlight that I can't imagine how hard this was for each of you to go through these processes, including as well as you, Tina. What do you think about this? I don't want to get too ahead, but I want to be mindful. There's a lot of stigma around this, right? Have you found ways to fight this stigma? How do you talk about this? What things happen to make it easier to talk about it?
Do you want to start, Gaurav?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the first time that I got diagnosed, I was a banker in the UAE. Funnily enough, I took it in very good spirit. The way I was a lot younger. I was supposed to come back to India within a few years anyway, because I wanted to join the family business and I was just buying time. So there was a new beginning awaiting me in India in terms of my career. I decided that the moment the medication, there was medication available, my doctor, once again, he gave me a lot of encouragement, and he said, look, as long as you take your medicines and you're serious about your medication, you're going to be all right over a period of time. It may be bad for a while, but it's definitely going to get a lot better. And that's exactly what happened. And I started working out and getting fit, and I started feeling a lot better about my body, putting on weight once again, eating right, and it was all good. For me, the stress, the anxiety actually happened the second time because the timing was pathetic. Uh, my second major flare happened in the year 2019, and it happened 1 month before my wedding. And it was like a series of just nightmares coming back to me. Uh, all of a sudden, 1 month before my wedding, I started getting terrible cramps, terrible acid reflux. I couldn't sleep at night because my esophageal tract was burning. I started losing weight drastically. Like a month before my wedding, I was probably about 82 or 83 kgs. I'm 6'1" in height, so that's pretty all right. That's healthy. And I dropped down by the time my wedding came to a 75 within just a month. And it gave me a serious amount of anxiety because I was like, God, why at this point of time did this have to happen? And the weight loss was drastic. I was starting to look frail, and a lot of my friends and family started asking me if I was all right, and I was like, certainly not. But over a period of time, the anxiety kicked in. I managed to go through my wedding, and over a period of time, this time around, I've realized that there are a lot of stigmas, a lot of issues that you have to deal with, and this is actually quite a loaded question, Tina, because it brings back a lot of memories, and I'm going to have to travel down memory lane, and not all of which is nice. So I have an inflammatory or stricturing kind of disease. So there was clearly inflammation and ulcers this time when they did my colonoscopy in 2019. And I started losing a drastic amount of weight. So I was 82 kgs before my attacks and flare-ups started again. And within, say, about 3 months, I had moved down to about 68 kgs. So needless to say, for people who've been seeing me every day, they were like, Gaurav, what has happened to you? Why have you lost so much weight? Why are you looking sickly? And I wish I could explain to them, because none of them really know what someone with an inflammatory bowel disease, be it Crohn's, be it ulcerative colitis, goes through. Because there's not enough awareness amongst the general public, because it's considered quite a rare condition in India and in the South Asian community. And I was like, I wish I could explain to you that I can't help the weight loss. It's not something that I'm doing deliberately. There is a lack of absorption of nutrition. Um, Another symptom that kicked in this time was the brain fog. I would suddenly, like, my head would stop working. I had no clue as to why that was happening. I realized later that there may be certain deficiencies in my body, or my iron levels were dropping, or whatever it was. But it was really disheartening to be sitting there and feeling like the entire world had stopped, or it was just not happening, and I wasn't in the zone. And this would happen, me being an entrepreneur, it would happen in the middle of meetings. It would happen while I was hanging out with my friends. And it was really, really very anxiety causing and extremely stressful to go ahead with that. Uh, I was a part of a business that had been running for about 5 years, ever since I'd come in and to India in 2015 after I got diagnosed, and I was running it. And it was running as a full-fledged business now, and me being responsible for a lot of what was happening. I was expected by all of my team. It's a family-run business, so of course my father to man up and to show up at work and to be able to handle the show. But with something like Crohn's, it becomes very difficult, because on days I would be sleeping for 10 hours and I would still fall asleep in the car because I was feeling so drowsy and so fatigued. I would have to take breaks and take a shut eye in the middle of office because I was feeling terribly sick and terribly unwell, and go and do meetings that were an hour or an hour and a half long thereafter. There have been times I've felt like throwing up in the middle of the car. I felt so acidic that I had to stop the car and ask for a little bit of a breather in the middle. I've thrown up on the side of the road, and I've still had to continue the show because I was responsible. There's a lot of in the Indian community. Another point that I'd like to address is that there's a lot of unsolicited advice that comes your way the moment you get diagnosed. One of them is that of alternate medicine and medication. I don't think anybody really understands uh, what this disease is all about. So they think in India, we come from a tradition of Ayurveda. We come from a lot of people actually supporting homeopathy. So I'm sure the Indians who are diagnosed with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis are very familiar or have actually tried either one of these two options. So you'll have your family members, your friends suggesting that, why don't you go to this homeopath? He treats brain cancer, so he can definitely help you with this. Why don't you go to this Ayurved? Because I know somebody who had, say, lupus and is doing extremely well under the Ayurved. Not only that, there are also a lot of, apart from the medication, there's a lot of spiritual advice that comes your way, try following this spiritual guru or that spiritual guru, listen to what they say, do some kind of kriya yoga, it'll definitely heal your illness. I've heard, it's all in the mind. So if from your mind you can imagine that your illness is getting cured, it's going to get cured. And none of this you can't really explain to them that, look, acceptability is the first thing that is so important when you have a condition which cannot be cured. Because if it could be cured, then medical science would have found a way to do it by now.
Gaurav,
Nobody
I'm
wants
nodding.
to see so many.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I saw Madhura's comment nodding so hard. I think we're all nodding very, very much right now.
I'm nodding really hard. It's the same thing here in the US. Lots of unsolicited advice, Gaurav.
I want, you've said it in
Absolutely.
different ways, Gaurav. One thing was when you were first diagnosed, you were looking for reasons as to how and why this happened, right? You were, it's something I hear in my patients all the
absolutely.
time. I'm physically fit. I take care of myself, and don't know family history and, the genetic aspect of it. There is a genetic component to Crohn's and colitis, but it's not very genetic. It's not Mendelian trait. There's over 270 genes identified, associated, but not a single one alone causes it. There's a lot of environmental factors that are beyond our control. So I think part of this that you raised in the first beginning of the conversation for everyone else to hear is, this did not happen because something you did. And a family member, I've heard this from so many of my South Asian patients, they've had family members, some related, some not, who butt in and say that this happened because you did this, right? Which is, something ridiculous, some type of judgment call, which has no place. It's only negativity. It's not founded in anything but some type of ridiculous personal bias. There's nothing, if you're watching this or you're a family member of a patient watching this, there's nothing that anyone can do to prevent this from happening or that they did to deserve this. This disease is unfair, and it happens.
Thank you, Dr. Nandi, for going
into that. A million
that.
reasons. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
the
you.
Other part
thank you, Dr. Nandi. Thank you so much.
Thank you for clearing that misconception up. It's a huge misconception in our culture.
It's a huge misconception, and I guarantee that if we knew why this happened to somebody, goodness, don't you think that I or my colleagues would chase that treatment down? There's nothing that somebody did to do this spiritually, by their actions, anything. And honestly, I found that this illness affects bad things happen to good people, is what I say, and the people, my patients that I have been afflicted with Crohn's and colitis are some of the best human beings that walk this earth and did nothing to deserve this. So if you're a family member or a patient remember this. Nothing can be done to prevent this, but it is something that is treatable. And I know we're getting questions about treatment. We'll cover that more of that later. The other thing that you mentioned poignantly just now was about these Ayurvedic treatments, or even what we call, complementary therapies. And certainly Western treatments. Some of them have been founded by looking at Asian herbal treatments, such as statin drugs for anti-cholesterol. Even turmeric, haldi in our culture has some anti-inflammatory properties, which have been at very, very high doses helpful in mild ulcerative colitis for some patients with evidence. But not everything that is complementary or alternative, I hate the word alternative, is founded in science. And anecdotal reports of this happened for one person is not necessarily translatable to all. And I want to understand, there is no such thing as one type of Crohn's disease and one type of ulcerative colitis. So when we look on Dr. Google and we see inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, it's not so simple. There are, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of different things that have to happen in the immune system, genetics, diet, bad luck. We're talking about environmental triggers, everything from tobacco and smoke to chemical exposures that we don't even yet know diagnose. All these things must come together to create what we see in the end, the Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. So there's probably more than one type of Crohn's. Crohn's 1 to 1,000, ulcerative colitis 1 to 1,000. And if you're a patient out there who has overlapping features of both, which occurs in about 10 to 15% of our patients who have features of both, this is called indeterminate colitis. That should help additionally emphasize that that this inflammatory bowel disease is not a neat package and that there's just one or two treatments. We need multiple treatments for multiple different patients' IBD, and this treatment or this anecdotal report of this helped my cousin, etc., etc. That's good to put out there and share, but it doesn't mean that that's going to help the individual patient.
I actually completely agree with that, Dr. Nandi. In fact, it could be deleterious to one's mental health to actually say, this worked for so-and-so, perhaps it can work for you. I know for me, I tried God knows how many complementary alternative therapies, and it was frustrating. Why does this work for someone else and not for me? Even with biologics, why did this work for someone else and not for me? The reality is IBD is extremely individual, and it has potentially multiple causes. And so one thing that I wanted to get into a little bit, talking about stigma, and Gaurav, I'm so glad that you were able to elucidate, the fact that you led a very healthy life, were very fit, and this still happened to you. I think a lot of us are in that boat. I sort of want to understand the role of diet and nutrition and also that stigma. Right? So something that I've experienced a lot of is, oh, Tina, if you just try this diet, you might be cured. Diet is not a cure for IBD. And I kind of wanted to understand your thoughts as well as Dr. Nandi's thoughts on diet and nutrition and some of the things that you might have heard from people or some of the things that you may have tried. Ruchita, do you want to take a stab at this and then Gaurav?
Sure. So heads up, my family is attending this and they are going to be offended by this, but I can't help it. I have to put the truth out there. So, yeah. So since I was a kid, I have always been a thin person, and, I have always been spoken to as, why aren't you eating this? Why aren't you just eating a lot of food? You are so skinny, just eat. And for some reasons, I couldn't. And that turned out to be why I couldn't. It's because of Crohn's disease. And again, with the therapies I'm taking, it also, leads to a loss of appetite. I really can't eat certain kinds of food when I have certain days or a flare up. So it all turns out, around the diet when you are managing your IBD. But so again, it's a bit difficult for me to speak this out loud, but I have always been badgered and hammered about my diet, that I'm not eating the right kind of food. I'm not eating specific kinds of food that would help me gain some weight or, help me become healthy in some kind of way. But I think all this arises around the stigma that is in, held up in the Indian community, because again, this is, if they would just know that IBD isn't really because of what I'm eating, not because of some kind of biscuit I'm eating right there, not because of the bread I'm eating. Nope, it is just an autoimmune condition, and it really isn't triggered. It is, no, sorry, it can be triggered by the diet I am having, but it is again my decision to understand what is triggering. And it wasn't caused because of the diet I was on, or
Yeah.
uh, really not something I was putting into my body, or I wouldn't consciously hurt myself or wouldn't consciously ask myself to get Crohn's in any kind of ways just by some specific diet or nutrition I am on. So I would really like to put it out there for everyone, and everyone knowing about IBD, that it's not because of the diet you are on. It could help by understanding a few triggers that really hurt you and avoid them, but not because of what you've eaten in the past. And also the stigma, I would like to just add on to it. The worst thing I have heard is I have got an IBD because of my bad karma, which is completely not true. Please do
Absolutely
not say
false.
that to people.
Oh my God.
Don't even get me started on that.
Richard, I only have to know you for
Yes.
2 seconds to know you're a sweetheart and have a beautiful heart. You have
There you
good
go.
karma.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No. Rachita, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so hard because, our culture believes in karma. We believe in reincarnation. There's a lot of, folk beliefs, superstitious beliefs that play into our IBD diagnosis. And having a bowel condition, having an intestinal condition, automatically, and we can't even fault our parents or can't even fault our elders for this. Automatically, the thought goes to, oh, it must be something in the diet. So I've been there with you. I've had my family on these things too. And, I just want to say to our families out there, we love you. We really appreciate the care, the tender love and care that you give us. But sometimes some of these comments can be overwhelming, and we just need a little bit more support in terms of, you know what? We want to open up our diets. We want to try new things, especially if we're starting to feel better. So I think that this is really important also for our mental health, to see what things that we can try, what things that we can, still enjoy again. So just know that diet is very much tied to our mental health. Gaurav, would you like to add anything? Yes, thanks, Dr. Nandi.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, to be honest, I don't know anybody in India there are very few people who aren't foodies in India. Street food is massively famous in any city in India, right? As is aping the Western diets of fast foods, such as we all like our burgers, we like our pizzas, we like our fried chicken for those who are non-vegetarian. So, I've grown up eating all the junk that you can possibly imagine, and no, I'm not guilty about it at all. Just because so have the rest of my friends. So has pretty much everybody I know who's my age or who's older. Uh, yes, we go out for a lot of occasions because we are very social as a community, and the food is just as rich and spicy there too. But having the first time around, when I was diagnosed in 2015, I did go on a restricted diet for about a year, just to be able to control the situation better, because I had a stricture, and I didn't want further trouble, because there were times and days on which I would feel my stomach cramping, or I'd feel extremely uncomfortable no matter what I ate. It could be khichdi, or it could be just like boiled rice with boiled vegetables, and I'd still be feeling absolutely terrible. But this time around, post my diagnosis, I felt like I was tolerating, or over a period of time rather, I felt like I was tolerating fiber pretty badly. Gluten, lactose, I've always had a problem with, especially since I was a child, so I avoid lactose. Sugar wasn't going down too well. I have a problem of constipation, so it continuously seems to crop up and it seems to slow down my motility. So I have been very selective and I have chosen certain food forms which help me clear my bowels, because I think my problems begin from there. And then it leads to a lot of other problems such as gas and acidity that I don't want to deal with on a regular basis. So it's just easier to lead my life. But I do indulge once in a while. It's not like I don't eat at all. I mean, yeah, there sometimes if there's fried chicken in the house, or a nice biryani, I'm non-vegetarian, so I would completely indulge. I'm not scared to try a lot of new food, and I see a general fear in Asians once they get diagnosed, and I want to address this, where they just stop eating a lot of kinds of food because they hear it on Facebook groups, or somebody else says this is not something I can tolerate with Crohn's disease. And it's imperative to actually go back to the point that Dr. Nandi was making just a while ago, where you said that Crohn's or ulcerative colitis behaves very, very differently with different individuals, and it's an absolute case to case basis. So, really taking out all of it and just eating those 7 to 10 select items, especially during your flare, and then continuing to eat it because you have this fear of eating food because you couldn't tolerate it at one point of time, and your mind tells you that you still can't tolerate it, is causing a lot of problems, especially mentally, with a lot of the South Asian community. And I think we see this on our support groups and with people in general who we know who share the same. As for myself, I haven't stopped. I've just limited it. I'm careful because, of course, I don't want anything going wrong with my gut. But I tend to try and have whatever it is I can. I don't even not indulge in a little bit of alcohol every now and then. I mean, I do okay with red wine. I do okay with vodka, with gin. Beer doesn't suit me. Whiskey doesn't either. So I've stopped those two. But the rest of it, once in a while, if I have a drink, I don't have any problem at all. Not that day, not the next day. I don't get up with a hangover or severe acidity. So I'm absolutely all right. Uh, uh, I would
Great
also
points,
interestingly
Gaurav.
like to raise. Thank you. Thank you, Tina. I would interestingly like to raise a point about playing the blame game as to what could have caused the illness. And since we're talking about diet, I was a smoker before I actually got diagnosed with IBD. I want to be very frank about that. And a lot of my family actually blames the habit that I had of smoking for and says that it's a cause for my IBD. And I've tried reasoning out with them in many ways, and of course I've read that smoking could trigger certain issues with Crohn's, and I've asked my GI, and he said smoking is best avoided if you've got Crohn's because it could cause complications in the long run. So I've quit, and I don't smoke at all anymore. But I did do it earlier, and it's constantly been a bone of contention between my family and I, and they've always blamed my habit of smoking for ED and the diagnosis. So I would really be interested to hear if Dr. Nandi has something to say in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Dr. Nandi, if you don't mind.
Not at all. No, so tobacco most certainly didn't cause you to have Crohn's. That's 100% right. It didn't cause you to develop your disease. But tobacco smoke has been associated with making existing Crohn's worse. Okay, it's also been associated with poor wound healing in surgery or anything like that. So tobacco itself isn't the causative agent. But it certainly doesn't help with Crohn's and can certainly aggravate it. But the fact that you were able to quit smoking is probably one of the most important things that you were able to do in as part of your treatment and your overall management. I want to address another thing about nutrition and diet. And that's a very complex subject. And certainly for us Desis, we have, we like the spice of life, right? We like our curry, our spices, our masala. We, depending on, I'm vegan, but depending on, if you like dahi and dairy, some people have intolerance, especially in our culture. So diet is a very difficult thing to approach. And I like what one of our attendees discussed, which was keeping a food diary and finding out what aggravates you. Here's the biggest thing I can tell you. Now, Tina and I and Neha Shah and Sumit Bhatia, Dr. Sumit Bhatia, we did another video on South Asian diet and inflammatory bowel disease. And you can check that out on our YouTube channel at FitWithMD, or on this Facebook Live platform that I have, or over at Own Your Crohn's. You can check out all our dietary suggestions. But here's the big takeaway. And listen to this, also families. We know that diet's part of this association with causing Crohn's and colitis, but it's not one-to-one. It isn't you ate this or had this general type of diet and it caused your inflammatory bowel disease. No, it is not that simple. It's a part, one of many factors that contributed to the development of inflammatory bowel disease. Now, that is very different from once you have Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Once you have the disease, okay? Diet is important because you need nutrition and building blocks to heal and get better. But it is not alone causing active disease either. It's not so simple. We have symptoms when we eat certain foods because why? Because the intestine is a long tube. It's a fermentation chamber. It is full of 100 trillion bacteria throughout our body, many in our gut, and they digest and break down and ferment our food just like bacteria and yeast ferment a fine grape into a fine wine. And it releases products that can give us bloat, gas, cramp, diarrhea, sometimes even constipation. When we have narrowing or stricture, when we have ulcers, which are exposed areas inside our intestine, the way that physical debris rubs across and tries to push through can also cause symptoms. When you eat something and have symptoms, that does not mean that food is causing your disease to get worse. It just means you're having symptoms. And that's very important to know, that maybe you need to change the format, change the type of the fiber. You need to steam it or cook it or make it less raw. You need to peel off the skin so it can pass through a stricture. It doesn't mean that it's aggravating or causing the disease to get worse. It just means that you need to change the format or the quantity with which you eat. Now, this is very simplistic. If you want a more in-depth discussion, please refer to our South Asian Diet IBD Live. But also, we will most definitely have more topics on this. We have access to some wonderful South Asian dietitians who are experts in the field. Dietitians are incredibly important. They know more than a gastroenterologist. I said it. Gastroenterologists don't get enough dietary and nutrition training, but dietitians, they're the experts. So if you want more advice, consult with a dietitian, keep a food diary, and keep track. So I do also want to be mindful of the clock and everyone's time. I would like our group to kind of give some closing remarks. I'll start off. Tina, do you want to kind of start us off and kind of recap a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Nandi, and thank you, Gaurav and Ruchita, again, for sharing your stories. I know that this is not easy to talk about stigma, to talk about your personal experiences, and I know that our families may be on and they may be hearing this. Some of this might maybe for the first time, but I want you to keep in mind how strong you are, and I give you so much credit for coming forward and sharing this. I know it's not easy. I did want to say, though, that, we have started this new initiative, IBD Desis, and the reason for it is to empower voices like yours, Gaurav and Ruchita. And I am, a proud co-founder. 5 of us others are, and we will be working with other South Asian voices across the globe to make sure that we are highlighting as many voices as possible. I realize that, even though we may not be in South Asia like myself, many of the cultural stigmas that we're facing are a common thread that a lot of us are experiencing, and that there are different nuances to those stigmas. And this is something that I want to continue to highlight, want to continue to talk about, so that we can make sure that we're normalizing sort of that talk around IBD. like you both just did today. So with that, I wanted to pass it over to Gaurav to, share some closing thoughts. Thank you again, Dr. Nandi, for hosting us.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Dr. Nandi for this opportunity, to be able to talk about my disease. This has been very liberating. It's also cleared a lot of doubts regarding the various stigmas that we have with the comments that we've got from Dr. Nandi. As a closing statement, I also want to say that in the South Asian community, uh, it's not easy to live with, say, something like IBD, which is so little understood by the people around us. It does affect you when, say, you're going for a social gathering or to a party, and it is a cause of embarrassment where you can't eat everything that's on the menu. People are constantly asking you why you're not eating. It's something that happens in India very often. They're asking you if you're at a party where there's alcohol that's served, and they were used to you drinking alcohol earlier. They simply can't understand why you're not drinking either. And it's very difficult to go through that experience time and again. But I want to take this opportunity because a lot of my friends and family are actually listening in on this, to be able to thank them for being so supportive and for helping me with my journey, helping me grow as a person uh, through this entire journey of Crohn's. I to the best of my ability. And I also want to take one last opportunity to thank my GI, Dr. Devashish Dutta, for taking care of me so well. He saved me twice from getting onto the surgical table, and I just hope he manages to do that every single time. And I just hope to stay well. So thank you.
Ruchita, would you like to close us up?
Sure. So, firstly, I would obviously like to thank Dr. Nandi and Tina to putting this together and giving me an opportunity to voice my story at such a huge platform. It is actually liberating to, speak about these things that weren't spoken about since so many years, and one by one, step by step, bringing down that stigma around IBD. And also, like Gaurav, I would like to thank my family to supporting me around these difficult times whenever I've needed them. And um, also thank you, Tina, to advocate for IBD or at such a huge level. You are actually inspirational, and I would love to join you on this journey. Thank you.
I think we all are very blessed to have had this conversation today. I really want to thank all of our panelists for showing their stories, showing their hearts on their sleeves, if you will. I want to thank their families who gave them support to be here today as well. I want to thank Tina, who's my partner in crime, if you will, and Gaurav, Ruchita, because this is a huge moment.
Thank you.
We need, it's long gone that we need to make this movement happen and talk about South Asian IBD because it affects so many people, and many people, to be honest, who are still undiagnosed. And remember, with information comes great power. With that power comes great responsibility. So wield this information that we try to impart here, share it with everyone you know. This is just one program, this first program of World IBD Day 2021. And we're missing some of our other guests today, but we will have them on the program. Some of the other topics that we hope to cover again in the future are going to be myriad with IBD Desis, from everything talking about fistulas and ostomy care to strictures, diet, mental health is incredibly important, how to stay hydrated. I mean, we can think of many topics, but you know what? The best topics come from you out there. So if you have more topics, more questions, more ideas, please put them in the comment box and DM me. I usually get back to everybody in time with resources, and I want to encourage you all to go ahead and sign up to join IBD Desis, the community. It's a safe community led by great, trustworthy people. It's a place for support. They're on Facebook. They're also on Instagram. And I've also listed all of our friends' handles here for their social media handles. Again, I'm Dr. Nandi, and I not only host this platform, but also a podcast dedicated to inflammatory bowel disease and other GI issues called GI Insights on ReachMD. You can find on Apple, Spotify, everywhere podcasts are. And again, our single command here, our single objective is to give good information to all IBD patients, not just our South Asians, but everywhere around the world. So we are really appreciative of your support in joining us today. So we'll see you guys next time. Everybody wave bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.